Hello and welcome to Newsline. I'm Layla Arakova.
Coming up on the show.
With childbirth an even more daunting prospect than ever before, we'll look at one family's experience with birth in the pandemic.
We also speak to the owners of one Melbourne donut business about how they've been able to miraculously thrive amongst economic downturn.
But first, here are some of today's headlines.
First human trials of a coronavirus vaccine in the Southern Hemisphere have begun today at the Nucleus Network Clinic in Melbourne. Preliminary results are expected in early July. We'll bring you the latest coverage on those trials live from Melbourne later in the show.
In a press conference earlier today, Prime Minister Scott Morrison outlined how the new JobMaker scheme is set to help Australia's post-COVID economy. Changes will be made to the skills system in order to create jobs in the labour market. More on that later with our live reporter.
And in the UK, Boris Johnson has stood by his chief advisor Dominic Cunning after he breached lockdown rules by driving 400 kilometres from London to County Durham. Cunning has not yet expressed public regret over his decision. Now to our first story. Indonesia has been hit badly by the COVID-19 pandemic, with the country currently reporting 22,750 cases of the virus with 1,391 deaths. With the government's refusal to implement a full lockdown, Indonesians and global organisations are starting to notice the cracks. Sayisri Ravisankar reports the current situation.
Indonesia is our closest neighbour. With over 267 million people in an area one-fourth the size of Australia, how has Indonesia coped with COVID-19? The Indonesian government has implemented large-scale social restrictions in COVID-19 hotspots like the densely populated Jakarta and West Sumatra, while allowing unrestricted movement in places where the infection rates are seen to be low. With low rates of testing and increasing rates of death, how have Indonesians reacted to the government's response to COVID-19?
The government popularity is declining now. Even among those who strongly supported the government, President Joko Widodo in this case, many of them are becoming critical. And of course, this is a pandemic. People realize that people are dying. I personally have 6 people whom I know, including my college professor, my classmate, who died because of this pandemic. And because of this, people will not tolerate the government anymore because this is getting personal.
Harsono says the government has not done enough for people with mental health disabilities, saying the conditions in some care homes creates a conducive environment for the virus to spread.
Houses for children with autism, grown up with mental disabilities, the government hasn't done enough yet. It is unfortunate that many of these people are shackled, either their hands or their feet, in some cases put behind bars. If one of them is infected, the whole population might be infected as well.
With global organizations watching Indonesia's every move, it is left to be seen how this charismatic president would lead his people through the pandemic. Sayisri Ravishankar, Newsline.
Sayisri Ravisankar with that report. COVID-19 has forced much of the world into isolation, altering our lives significantly. For those who are at a high risk and more vulnerable, another degree of difficulty was added to an already challenging life. Our own Ned O'Brien is one of those people.
It's not much, but it's my office, my hobby shop, my playground. I've been immunocompromised since birth, but more prominently so since my transplant in 2014.
Being immunocompromised means to be more vulnerable or at a higher risk, but to be immunocompromised, it means your immune system is weakened or faulty. It means you're more susceptible to and have reduced ability to fight off and stave off infections.
My mother is my main carer and has been for 6 years. With a pandemic on the loose, she is fearful of what once was.
Over the last 6 years, we've had to battle and we've come so far. And I don't want to go back to those terrible early days again when everything was touch and go.
With coronavirus wreaking havoc on the world, I've been holed up here since late March. You mightn't think my life is much different from yours, but my day starts with a cocktail. Not an alcoholic one, but of the chemical type. I'm also required to go to the Epworth Hospital every 4 weeks for treatment. The hospital requires me to be fit and healthy in order to be allowed entrance. But as I'm more vulnerable than most, perfect health is almost unattainable, especially at the end of my 4-weekly cycle.
Like an instant immunisation, but it only lasts 4 weeks because the proteins in the infusion die away.
Aside from the rare outing for treatment, my day consists of spending a majority of time at my desk where I could complete study or other work. For fun, some might consider me old-fashioned, with plenty of enjoyment coming from books, but I'm also a gamer with a decent internet connection. When it comes to exercise, it's one of the more difficult things. There's only so much you can do at home.
Hi, Ron.
My day ends in preparing for the next. Cleaning. Wiping down everything I touch to make sure it's sanitised and the germs exterminated before I can touch it all again tomorrow. Ned O'Brien for Newsline.
People of all ages are exploring new hopes for the future as we begin to see the relaxation of COVID-19 restrictions across various states and territories. RMIT reporters spoke to their friends, family, and loved ones about their hopes and fears during the pandemic.
I'm working at home completely now, and all of my meetings are held online, and on a personal front, it means that I'm spending a lot more time at home and with family and not going out very much. You know, you spend a lot of time when you're at a workplace doing things that are not really necessarily connected with work, but it's about relationships in the workplace. And so when you're working at home, it's much harder to maintain those relationships. You do use things like video conferencing and things like that, and I've been using that a lot, and that helps, but it's not the same.
Well, I guess it's affected my education as my university has transitioned to online learning. So instead of going to uni every day and doing labs and stuff at uni, I have to do it all online now. Well, I guess a lot of my university work involves like being in the lab and completing experiments and stuff. So I think not being able to actually do that in person definitely impacts my career prospects, because when it comes to doing lab work and stuff in the future, I won't be as prepared, and a lot of the techniques I won't be used to.
Not being able to go out, to the museum or the gallery or to my favourite cafe to have breakfast.
Human trials of a front-running COVID-19 vaccine have started in Melbourne today. Katie Martin joins us live from Camberwell with the latest. This is some really exciting news, Katie. Can you tell us more about what's happening?
That's right, guys. Socially distanced Melburnians will definitely welcome this news. These human trials are the first of their kind in the Southern Hemisphere, and they start today at the Nucleus Network, which is a clinical research organisation right here in Melbourne. The vaccine is called NVX-CoV2373. A bit of a mouthful, but what it tries to do is strengthen a person's immune response to COVID-19 by encouraging neutralising antibodies. These are the things inside our bodies that stop viruses from replicating and growing, and they stop us from becoming ill. The vaccine's being developed by US biotechnology company Novavax, and it's one of 10 vaccines currently being trialled in humans, according to the World Health Organization.
Who are the people receiving the vaccine?
So all potential COVID-19 vaccines are still in very early stages of testing. So right now, these trials are only being conducted on healthy people between 18 and 59 years old. 130 people are taking part in this Melbourne trial, and that number will increase later in the week when the trial is expanded to Brisbane.
And does this mean that the Novavax vaccine will be the one to cure coronavirus?
While the preliminary results of these trials are expected sometime in July, this doesn't mean we'll know by then whether this particular vaccine works. There are a number of phases the vaccine has to go through before it's deemed safe, including much larger human trials to find out whether the vaccine can really fight off COVID-19.
So how long will we have to wait before a vaccine is ready?
While these human trials are welcome news for everyone, a COVID-19 vaccine unfortunately won't be completely ready anytime soon. The good news is, though, there are over 100 vaccines being worked on globally, and because of the huge rates of infection we're seeing around the world, pressure for a vaccine is mounting, and these phases are in some cases being sped up. For example, combining phases so multiple factors like safety and effectiveness of the vaccine can be tested at once, when normally they'd be tested apart and at different times. People can also expect to see results from human trials of other vaccines across the world, with US biotech company Inovio set to publish their results from a smaller human trial early next month. Guys?
Thanks, Kate.
Since COVID-19, many hospitals have had to relocate intensive care units to make space for infection control. For many nurses, that means a reassignment from their normal ward to manage the outbreak. Samantha Burgess has more.
Over the last few months, hospitals have seen a drastic decrease in patients needing intensive care for non-COVID related reasons. And with elective surgeries restricted and trauma cases down, many hospital wards are much quieter than usual.
Because there's a lot less people driving, and there's a lot less people going out and drinking on the weekends and drink driving and things like that. There's just a much less, a lot less people coming in and presenting. Like even the ED, I was saying that all the other departments in the hospital are pretty quiet. Even the ED, I don't think they've been this quiet in years.
Many of the intensive care units have been transformed into COVID-19 wards. Nurses like Emma have been redeployed into other parts of the hospital, including the COVID wards and testing facilities. They are also being trained to use ventilators in case of a second wave or spike in coronavirus cases.
So essentially they're training a whole bunch of us up in the hospital that if it ever got too bad, or if we see, a second wave that comes in and they need some extra staff, then they've got people that have this very basic training that they can actually man these extra ICU and ED beds.
According to the World Health Organization, nurses make up 66% of Australia's medical workforce and earn on average $32.95 an hour. They often feel overworked due to challenging overnight conditions and a nurse-to-patient ratio of 1 nurse to every 4 patients. Due to the coronavirus, they now have to take extra precautions to not wear their scrubs outside the hospital for infection control and fear of attack from the public. After COVID-19, many nurses are hoping for a wage increase now that their hard work has been seen throughout the country. This has been Samantha Burgess for Newsline.
When we think of COVID-19 as a virus, we may focus on its effect on our physical health. But now that infection rates have decreased significantly and we are slowly coming out of quarantine, it's important to recognise its impact on our mental health, which may be far more detrimental in the long run. My fellow anchor, Layla Arakova, reports.
The disruption in our life rhythms has taken a psychological toll on all of us, but people with pre-existing mental health conditions are particularly vulnerable at this time.
Having like a good routine while you have like bipolar disorder is actually like pretty important, but it's really hard to like find structure right now. I was diagnosed when I was 18 by Headspace, which is a free like kind of public health mental health service. It's been a lot harder to access the service because there's like a higher demand for it right now.
I recently just got out of hospital. I spent 5 weeks there.
Esme was diagnosed with bipolar a month ago.
During this time particularly, there are a lot more people wanting beds. I was lucky enough to secure accommodation because it was really necessary for my recovery.
The global call for mental health awareness has seen a response from the federal government in the form of a $48.1 million mental health and well-being pandemic response plan and the appointment of the country's first deputy chief medical officer for mental health. University of New South Wales conducted the first study on the long-term mental health effects of the economic lockdown.
The study is to look at the long-term impact of COVID-19 on mental health, but also social connectedness and also cognitive functioning, because we think actually the impacts might be really protracted.
The pandemic has forced everything online. You're increasing your focus on telehealth to be able to still provide support to people even if you can't be face-to-face with them.
Although face-to-face appointments are preferred across the mental health sector, video and audio appointments might continue to grow in the future.
It's something that everyone should have up to a certain level of standard, because that means that in the future we can provide for more clients, say they're, clients that are remote or in rural areas, so they can still have the same level of support.
Layla Arakova, Newsline.
With some social distancing measures still in place, people have been finding new ways to stay busy. RMIT reporters spoke to their friends, family and loved ones about their hopes and fears during the pandemic. Liam McAllister with this piece.
I've been trying to keep busy. I've been cooking a lot. I've been trying new recipes. So I've been watching TV shows and making new recipes. And just reading really magazines even. Not so much novels, but just doing that and just relaxing, doing puzzles. I do puzzles in my magazines, like crossword puzzles, things like that to occupy my time.
I haven't sort of got anything that requires me to be in a team. I'm not in a club or a team sport or anything like that. I'm just sort of pretty much, if I go and do some exercises on my own, whether it be riding a bike, walking the dog, that hasn't stopped anyway. So yeah, but the main thing is, I suppose, I miss having the sport. Yeah, the dog's pretty happy. He's getting lots of walks. Sit. Good boy. I find a lot of people are walking around Edwards Park Lake at the moment because they're stuck at home. So whereas you don't see the amount of people normally. I mean, you see people walking around the lake and running around the lake.
One thing I have been doing is advancing on my hobbies. So just about to join an art class. So I've been researching doing another art class because I love doing painting and drawing and charcoal. So I've been looking around for another class.
And the people that you take for granted that you'd go and see when the drop of a hat.
I have a regular catch-up once a week with a group of 7 friends. We do that on Skype. We all grab a glass of wine and some nibbles, and we sit around and chat for about an hour and a half.
Whether it be conspiracy theories or dangerous health advice, social media has been rampant with COVID-19 misinformation over the past few months. With the risk this content poses to our communities, what are social media platforms doing to protect public health? John Moyle has the story.
There has been a lot of dangerous coronavirus misinformation on Facebook over the past few months. You've probably seen some. Conspiracies linking it to Bill Gates, 5G towers or chemtrails, all of which have been thoroughly debunked. Or you may have heard fake health advice from people spruiking cures to COVID. In April, Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at Oxford University reported that due to the pandemic, the number of English language fact checks rose more than 900% from January to March. This harmful content spreads in various ways, but one specifically relates to Facebook. In the past, Facebook has notoriously resisted its responsibility to combat the spread of mistruths. But with coronavirus misinformation and its clear impact on public health, I want to know whether Facebook has changed.
Now that the COVID pandemic has come along, they seem more willing to try to ban certain kinds of communications by people because they have life-and-death consequences. But they still allow anti-vaxxers to push misinformation and disinformation on their platform. They haven't tried to do anything about that. And as I said, they're not planning to do anything about misleading political advertising.
Gordon is referring to the fact that political ads remain largely unchecked by Facebook moderators, some even containing harmful coronavirus misinformation and lies. And although some problematic pages have been taken down, and despite some efforts to point users to better information, the platform is still rife with hazardous content. Gordon said that although Facebook could do more, this problem is impossible to stamp out completely. And because of this, the responsibility is on us.
People need to know that what they share can have an impact on the health of society and the health of their friends and family. And it is up to them. It's their responsibility to make sure the information they share is accurate and truthful.
John Moyle, Newsline.
To international news, and Nick Ops joins us now. Nick, it appears like other parts of the world are also beginning to open up.
Thanks, Josh. Yes, coronavirus restrictions are starting to ease across the globe, with several countries rolling back their lockdown measures. In Spain, the government will remove quarantine requirements for international arrivals on July 1, so tourism can resume. Greeks are now allowed to travel on local ferry routes and visit restaurants, bars and cafes, as their government looks to restart the nation's tourism industry. Elsewhere, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced plans to end the nation's state of emergency. South Africa, Iceland and Saudi Arabia are among other countries easing restrictions. The number of confirmed coronavirus cases worldwide passed 5.4 million overnight, according to Johns Hopkins University. The global death toll from coronavirus now sits at over 346,000. The White House has brought forward a ban on travel from Brazil to the United States. The ban will now come into force on May 26, 2 days earlier than initially announced. Brazil has the second highest number of confirmed coronavirus cases in the world, behind the US. The Italian government is looking for 60,000 volunteers to enforce social distancing guidelines as the country's lockdown eases. The move comes after outcry surrounding Italians flaunting the rules over the weekend. Yesterday, Italy reported its lowest number of new coronavirus cases since early March. China's proposed national security laws for Hong Kong continue to cause controversy, with officials labelling those protesting the changes as terrorists. Protesters believe the laws threaten the island's one country, two systems policy and took to the streets on the weekend to protest the changes. The UK Prime Minister's senior advisor Dominic Cummings has insisted he did nothing wrong in driving his family over 400 kilometres from their London home to County Durham. Cummings also said a 50-kilometre trip to tourist hotspot Barnard Castle was designed to test his eyesight. There has been significant controversy around Cummings' conduct, with several government MPs suggesting he should resign. That's all for international news. Back to you guys.
In the wake of COVID-19, the changes to the tourism industry are set to shake up our way of life. Tourism in Melbourne has been halted
For the last couple months, however, with government restrictions easing, Melburnians will be able to visit some of their much-loved destinations. But how will Melbourne's hotspots operate with social distancing measures in place? Jonathan McGrath reports.
Across Victoria, pubs, cafes and restaurants are preparing to reopen, albeit with strict guidelines in place. Following similar guidelines, tourist destinations such as museums, aquariums and even the Melbourne Star will be able to reopen to the public. While venues will limit their numbers, keen visitors will be forced to plan ahead.
With obviously the restrictions around how many people can be in certain places, I think we're going to see a lot more booking being necessary. Not just being it's nice to do, but being you have to book in to go out to dinner, to go to this museum.
Young people play a massive role with tourism in Melbourne. However, with JobKeeper payments ending in September and many casual employees out of work, money is tighter than ever. The tourism industry will rely on people choosing to spend their money on tourist attractions.
At the end of the day, tourism is a discretionary spend, and so we rely on there being a stable economic situation before transactions and that sort of stuff can take place.
Last year, locals accounted for $81 billion of visitor spend, while international tourists accounted for $45 billion.
Domestic tourism was 2/3 of all visitor expenditure, and that opportunity is, businesses are going to have to capitalise on that if they want to survive over the next couple of months.
Tourists and thrill-seeking Melburnians will still have to wait to visit the iconic Luna Park, as Melbourne tourist attractions begin to adapt to new social distancing measures. With travel and tourism such a big part of the Victorian way of life, we're all hoping the industry will make a return in some form very soon. Jonathan McGrath, Newsline.
Now we check in with Isabella Crevitt, who's just listened to Scott Morrison's press conference where he announced the newly minted government program JobMaker. Isabella, can you fill us in?
Made a point of commending Australia thus far for standing up to challenging times and spoke about some touching moments that happened between tragedies. After that, he briefly described the forthcoming new government plan to bolster the economy by increasing jobs. This comes after he warned companies they'll have to eventually get off the medication of handouts like JobKeeper by declaring at some point you've got to get your economy out of the ICU.
So what is this new plan and how will it help the economy?
The plan is called JobMaker. It looks like the coalition wants to combine Commonwealth and state powers to revamp the TAFE and industry systems. There is a planned overhaul of how apprenticeships and courses will operate. Part of this is to unify training costs so they're more efficient and consistent. They want to enforce transparency between involved organisations and increase funding to the TAFE sector. They say this will help practical jobs become something to aspire to rather than look down upon. There will also be more pressure for companies to comply to laws rather than succumb to complacency so that people can be paid fairly.
And how long will it take for this plan to actually make a difference?
The Prime Minister said it could take 3 to 5 years, but that it depends on everyone's cooperation. However, he added JobMaker needs to be given a go since we cannot keep the current clunky and inefficient systems forever, especially if we want to get the economy back onto its feet. Back to you.
Thank you, Isabella. Where the coronavirus pandemic keeps families apart, it is hope shared across generations which brings us together. RMIT reporters spoke to their friends, family and loved ones about their hopes and fears during the pandemic. Sarah Oliver with this piece.
We count more than 2,000 cases in Australia.
Family is very, very important to me. I'm really concerned for my family and that we all come through this and we come through better people in the end. One of the things that I've really missed is the ability just to go out. I love being out in nature.
I miss going outside to see my friends and family.
But it's really important for me to allow myself to be creative. It's just a really disappointing thing to be in the performing arts.
The hope to me is that this has done something positive in the way of drawing people together. I do hope that maybe out of it all, a new way of thinking might have come in a lot of our lives as to the values that we do hold.
My hope is that as a race of people, we will understand what matters to us more, and we'll understand how nature gives us so much if we spend time with it. I'm delighted that families are getting so much more time with each other.
Me and my sister play a lot. We're watching movies and playing board games.
It's been good for us, I think, to know that we can't do what we normally would have done, but there are ways around things and we can work at it.
I've moved back down to the island, which is really awesome because I'm back amongst nature and that's really nice. And we have Sunmark and Diane staying with us for the week. So we're about to play a big game of Monopoly. I quite like this isolation business.
Hi, I'm Josh Martin and welcome back to Newsline. Now, if you think you had an interesting lockdown project, wait until you hear this one. With us today, we have reporter Carly Smith, who will be interviewing Dean Smith, co-founder of Museum Makers, who has been hard at work on a rather unusual piece.
So thank you for joining me today, Dean. Would you just mind explaining a little bit more about your project?
Thanks, Carly. Well, welcome to one of Natural History Productions studios in Castlemaine, where we are recreating a huge dinosaur called Titanosaur. It's a massive project, and you can see behind me just the lower parts of the legs, probably. It's a massive job. The Natural History Productions has been commissioned by the museum in Western Australia to make a recreation of this dinosaur as it would look when it was alive. So not a skeleton, but the real-looking dinosaur.
And is this an exact scale of how big the Titanosaurus was 90 million years ago?
Yeah, it sure is, Carly. Based on the dinosaur fossils found throughout the world, I think in parts of Europe and India, we've been measuring off those bones, and it's 17 metres long, which is a big dinosaur. It's part of the sauropod family. So like in Jurassic Park, you'd see the the brachiosaur and those big long-necked dinosaurs. So this is the same, in the same family as those, but a species called titanosaur. But yeah, exact size.
And with this project, how do you actually go about recreating a lookalike of a dinosaur?
Yeah, well, good question, because it goes all the way back to the commission coming from the Western Australia Museum, where all the researchers and curators in dinosaur fossils put together a brief to have this recreation done. So going by the bones, all measurements were made from those. Then an artist was employed to make a three-dimensional model on a computer and rendering all the muscles onto that. We received that file and then were given the opportunity to recreate it in the life size. So from that, we employed some engineers and so forth and got steel framing built. And from that, we also carved styrene foam blocks, which you'll see similar to this here. So this is styrene foam blocks, and then we've carved into the styrene. And then over the top of the styrene, we've carved all the muscle definition and everything going from the 3D render and our own research as well. Then we looked at recreating, we've actually found skin of dinosaurs in fossil form. So for the sauropods, they've found this very closely looking recreation of the skin. And this, we've recreated that, and what we're doing over the top of the styrene now is building the skin on. So we're sculpting over the top of the styrene, and then we're using our modelling tools and the texture pads which we've made from the recreations of the dinosaur fossil bones. That exact texture, what it would look like. You see Nikki behind here marking out some of the markings of where that texture will go.
Yeah, well, this is obviously a huge project. How long approximately will it take to finally and fully complete?
Well, we've got about 5 months to complete it. We've been going for a couple of months now, so 4 months all up to go from receiving the brief right through to the end, where now we've got to pull it. It's 17 metres long. We can't just tow it to Western Australia as well, so we've engineered it so that it comes apart, and then we'll recreate it back together again in sections over in Western Australia when we truck it over there in big trucks.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Dean, and for sharing this incredible project.
Yeah.
So back to you, Josh and Layla.
Thank you.
Coronavirus restrictions have hugely impacted the way cafes and restaurants operate. Even well-established food businesses have struggled, and new ones are finding it even tougher. Well, April Austin has the story of one new business that is defying that and thriving through the pandemic.
For many new businesses, a global pandemic would be a death sentence. But not for new Ivanhoe-based business Gotham Donuts, who is doing better than merely surviving the COVID-19 pandemic. The business opened in February and has grown week by week, even while Stage 3 restrictions were in place.
I think each week now it's growing, which is really good. I'm really happy with how it's going right now, considering the pandemic that's going on.
George Telekidis is the 20-year-old owner of the business. Even though the streets of Ivanhoe were the quietest they'd been in years just before opening, George wasn't daunted about the prospect of trying to get a new business off the ground.
The business next to me is Kozaduchi, the ice cream store, and Victor, the owner, he's been there for like 15 years. And he was telling me from the start, yeah, the streets are really quiet, I haven't seen them this quiet in years, but I was kind of opening a new business. I was excited. So I was like, no, don't worry. It's all good.
Gotham Donuts is largely takeaway focused, which has helped everything turn out all good. Another factor is the tendency for people to turn to comfort foods, such as donuts, in times of crisis.
Heightened stress, anxiety, or just being around food more is likely to lead to more, what people call comfort eating. Yeah, it's totally normal human behaviour to choose to eat something to either comfort yourself or, for any reason other than hunger.
From June 1st, Victorian cafes and restaurants will be allowed to seat up to 20 customers. George is looking forward to continuing to expand his business once restrictions ease.
There's a lot we can do, just keep expanding, keep growing. You know, it'd be good to have people back in, sitting down in the shop.
April Austin, Newsline.
In the COVID-19 pandemic, every life has become a little extraordinary. On Tuesday, the 12th of May, RMIT journalists documented a day in the life of people across the world. Here's Yusuf Saudi.
According to the Australian Government's Department of Health, people over 70 are more susceptible to coronavirus. This has meant almost all older relatives have had to stay home, unable to see their families. On the morning of Tuesday, the 12th of May, reporter Daisy Murdoch and her family wake up and watch the sunset together to show their love for their grandparents during this global pandemic.
Hello, Nana and Papa. I've just woken up. It's about 6 o'clock. Got Ginger here. I'm gonna go wake Netta, but I might be abused, so let's see how that goes. Netta, it's time to get up.
Fuck off.
I'm getting dressed and putting lots of layers on because it's freezing outside, and I realised I've put on Nana's old blue fleece, which is one of my favourites. And we're off with Ginger leading the pack. Where does the sun rise? North, south, east or west?
I don't know. North.
Is it west?
No, it's not north.
West.
It's not north.
Hi Nana, hi Papa.
Hi Nana and Papa.
Hi Nana and Papa. Hi Nana and Papa.
Morning.
Good morning, Nana and Papa.
The sun looks really nice from here. The sun is up. It is 7:04 and the sun is up. 7:04. Bye Nana and Papa. We love you. Bye Nana and Papa. Bye Nana. Bye Papa.
Bye, Nana and Papa. Bye, Nana and Papa.
That was Daisy Murdoch with that story. Australia has 31 people in hospitals today due to COVID-19. Healthcare workers campaigned early in the pandemic to encourage the public to stay at home so that they and the public weren't at any increased risk. They are continuing to provide support, guidance and care to those in need during this time. It is mid-morning on Tuesday the 12th of May and reporter Cara Briggs finds out more.
My name is India. I am a registered nurse at Royal Perth Hospital Emergency Department.
My name's Bill Adamson and I am one of the directors here at the Neighbourhood Clinic. I'm an osteopath by trade.
The global pandemic of the coronavirus has put a lot of people out of work and into forced isolation. However, for our healthcare workers, this time has been busier than ever as they work on the front lines in the fight against COVID-19.
Kind of felt like doomsday was coming. We didn't know what to expect. For the whole 12-hour shift, you would have to wear your gloves, your gown, your mask, your goggles, start breathing in your own CO2. And I have found every shift I'm over there, I've just come home with the biggest migraine.
The priority was really saving lives and getting people alive. So we also then set up a triage process where we had either myself or one of the other directors taking temperatures and asking every patient who came through the clinic a number of questions to make sure they weren't at a at-risk population of being a carrier.
Staying at home, social distancing and extreme hygiene precautions are all things we've been doing to avoid contact with the virus. But for these workers, it's their job to identify and directly care for those infected with COVID-19.
Yeah, so I've looked after probably a good handful of positive corona patients. So that's quite frightening, being in such close contact with a patient. Even though we're well protected in our gear, you still have that in the back of your mind.
We've been doing the COVID testing, probably done 10 tests a day the last 3 weeks, and thus far we've had no positives. Fingers crossed that stays the same.
Alongside personal risk, there have been other impacts for these workers.
My family didn't want to see me, which is completely fair. My dad's in his late 60s. And that freaked me out. Yeah, I found some people treated me like I was infected in some way because I was looking after these patients.
The medical supplies have jacked up the prices on masks from 5 cents to $5. As a business owner, there was a lot of stress. Well, we had a massive drop in income. And at the same time, we had a massive increase in our costs because medical supplies were gouging us so much.
It was really good when that hashtag thing was going out saying stay at home, wear work for you kind of thing. Although people are starting to come through the ED again with their unnecessary things, which has been quite frustrating. We are still swabbing people for coronavirus and looking after people with shortness of breath and all these respiratory symptoms that could be COVID.
These amazing efforts have helped Australia flatten the curve. But it's important to remember that while some restrictions have lifted, the pandemic is not over, and we must do everything we can to stop the spread.
Currently with that report, the Muslim holy month of Ramadan ended under the week ahead. Social interactions are an important part of this religious holiday, and leaders in the community describe this Ramadan as unlike any other before. This is started with this report.
Ramadan is from April 24 to May 24. It is a time where Muslims refrain from consuming anything during sun-up. Due to COVID-19, social distancing measures and religious venue closures, Muslims have been unable to practice Ramadan as they would normally. Things like the community sense Ramadan brings in mosques is gone for Muslims.
We never had a Ramadan like the one we have now. People expect every Ramadan to meet one another, break the fast. So this is what we used to have previously, but this year all that is gone. The mosques now look like abandoned places.
Muslims are also missing out on Taraweeh, which is a traditional prayer only done during the month of Ramadan. This prayer gives the chance for Muslims to come together more as a community.
After sunset and the last prayer of the night, then people come back to the mosques to pray Salatul Taraweeh, and that is where the people meet, ask each other how they are, asking about their families, their health, their situation. Now we don't have Taraweeh.
While the first step of easing restrictions has come into place for Victoria, this doesn't make a difference to practicing Ramadan and the following celebrations of Eid al-Fitr, the festival of breaking the fast.
The number is very small, 10 people. How can you decide these 10 people, which 10 people will go to pray in the mosque? It is not feasible.
While Muslims have been unable to attend the mosque, come together and break fast, some have found alternatives. This includes the care for vulnerable Muslim women during Ramadan within the workplace community of the Moroccan Soup Bar.
When Ramadan came and often iftar is together, we had to find creative ways of having iftar, of connecting, whether it be via Zoom, and we had a bizarre Zoom iftar one night. And sometimes women just felt a sense of safety and comfort just parking outside the shop and just being in that proximity.
Others have also been able to come closer with their family, with people being less busy during the day.
My daughter spend more time when we cook together. My son have more time. They help me in the kitchen, my husband. Yeah, that's right. Good for more communication, more social life. Before, everyone busy.
Wadad has been surprised with how she's been connecting with her kids more.
My son never helped me in the kitchen. This Ramadan, he helped me cook, make a crema, make cake. 2 days ago, he made cake for me. Before, he doesn't. We know each other more and have no rush. Examples, they say, Mom, when we was little, how you do Ramadan?
Ramadan mightn't be the same for Muslims this year, but some still stay strong. Yusuf Saudi, RMIT Newsline.
It's evening on Tuesday the 12th of May. Where these hours were once home to Melbourne's live music scene, social distancing has had a devastating impact upon the entertainment industry. Live performances are banned during the Victorian government's lockdown. Melbourne disco group Groove City have been forced to communicate with fans online, but are hopeful for a quick return to normal crowds. Aidan Williams reports.
The COVID-19 pandemic has affected the world's music industry for audiences and performers alike. Cancelled events, closed venues, and a massive loss of jobs, the Australian arts sector has lost an estimated $340 million in revenue. This loss has been felt no more than by Australian disco revival band Groove City, who have lost not just income from their live shows, but months off their touring schedules.
We did unfortunately lose some pretty key shows that we're going to play this year. I think there was one in Sydney that we're going to play with Winston Surfshirt and Cosmos Midnight. So to lose that, and then I think there were about 4 or 5 other shows up until about the end of June.
Yeah.
So it's just made us have to rethink our strategy for the end of the year.
In absence of crowds, Groove City have started streaming their sets live on Friday nights, but say that playing in your bedroom isn't the same as playing on stage, and that the industry isn't equipped to support some artists remotely.
There's nothing really that's able to reimburse the artists that are getting played by DJs yet. I'm sure there'll be something after this whole thing, once streaming is now taken off. The main profit is from doing the shows, so they can use as many samples from other people as they want, but as long as they're playing shows, they actually make a decent coin still.
On May 22nd, Groove City are playing a live stream set to empty seats at Fitzroy's Nightcap. Returning to the venue after playing 2 successive sold-out shows there, the duo says the empty room will be a strange but positive experience.
Yeah, I think for the way we've shaped this set is kind of is good that there's not going to be a crowd there, because we don't have to. It's not as energetic as a normal Groove City set, just because we're playing slow originals and kind of taking breaks in between. It's not a continuous set, so it's good that we can use this as a nice little tester and get up on a stage still, and just see how the response goes.
A change amidst the pandemic is the reality that the venues that host musicians are facing. The Melbourne Live Music Census confirmed the Greater Melbourne area had 553 live music venues, making Melbourne's collective music scene larger than any other major city in the world. With over 7% of the Australian economy being funded by the arts sector alone, music venues are finding a new means to stay afloat during the quarantine.
The main purpose of the event initially was because of this crowdfunding that we want to do, and then it kind of grew into a larger thing where we were supporting other artists by pre-recording them and giving them a place to play. We were kind of what's a project we can all work towards, and that was it. When we have seated, social distanced shows where people can actually come in and enjoy it live. But yeah, for now, I think it's probably more just a creative way to launch our packages, our exclusive packages, and give other people, other artists, an opportunity to play and give them some like really high quality content.
As normality comes back to Melbourne's music scene, some venues have survived and some musicians are staying alive. This has been Aidan Williams reporting for RMIT Newsline, Melbourne.
Welcome back to Newsline. And now, taking us through the world of dollars and cents is Willem van den Deren with finance.
Thanks, Josh. The ASX has today reached an 11-week high, rising 1.82% to reach 5,717 points. Notably, travel stocks have surged for a second consecutive day, with Webjet and Flight Centre among the beneficiaries. In the US, the Dow Jones has bucked its recent upwards trend, dropping 0.037% after the US stock market closed for Memorial Day weekend. In contrast, the Nasdaq has surged, increasing by 0.43%. In Japan, the Nikkei has continued its steady coronavirus rebound, rising a further 2.2%. To currencies, conversion rates within a potential trans-Tasman travel bubble have remained steady, with $1 Australian buying 107 New Zealand cents. The Aussie dollar is also buying 66 US cents, 60 euro cents, 54 British pence, and just over 70 Japanese yen. To the commodities market now, where gold has continued to weaken, an Australian ounce will currently cost $2,643. Brent and crude oil have both taken tentative steps towards recovery, up 0.4 and 0.84% respectively, as the market looks to return from a 20-year low. That's the latest finance news for today. Layla and Josh, it's back to you.
During the pandemic, pregnancy and childbirth have looked different to normal for expecting parents. Restrictions mean no baby showers, no guests at the hospital, and very little support into early parenthood. Jessica Boland shares with us one family's experience bringing new life into the world amidst a global pandemic.
That day it was just like a really hard day.
This is Sam Callanan. She and her partner Zach just welcomed their second child Brooks into the world about 2 months ago. He's beautiful and healthy, but early parenthood hasn't been exactly how the Callanans expected. For Sam, coronavirus restrictions came into play at a very stressful time.
So everything was pretty much normal until a week before I gave birth. I got a call like an hour before my appointment and they just said no one else is allowed to come. So I got there that day and it just was really, really eerie. Like the hospital just wasn't a nice place to be. That's where it really sunk in, literally 3 days before I was supposed to give birth.
They had each other, but that was pretty much all the support Sam and Zach had. With restrictions in place and their family's safety a top priority, they weren't even allowing direct family to visit. And now that Zach's back at work, Sam has had to tackle 2 kids under 2 without the support she expected.
I expected to have someone here, not every day, but like when I needed them and they could give their full attention to Ryder or to Brooks.
I think that broke my heart when Sammy said, you know, she couldn't have spent any time with Ryder, with Brooks alone, because Ryder was always up and about and nobody could take him off their hands.
While the COVID-19 restrictions have disrupted every plan the Callanans may have had with their new baby, unprecedented times do have their benefits, and Sam and her family have learnt to adapt.
Once Brooks is down, I'm giving Ryder my full attention, but he loves his brother, so that's So that's like Handy. He hasn't seemed to be jealous or anything like that. See, I think it was really nice to just spend a lot of time as a family with the four of us.
You know, you can't get any closer than what this has thrown at them.
And with restrictions slowly easing, it won't be long until families can finally reunite. Jessica Boland, Newsline.
To the weather now with Isabel Harris. And it's looking like a pretty chilly week, Isabel, isn't it?
Certainly is, Josh. It's going to be a wet and woolly weather across the board here. A bit of respite for the top end. Tomorrow, Darwin will be mostly sunny with a max of 31. Brisbane is partly cloudy with a max of 25. Sydney has morning showers and a max of 20. Canberra is partly cloudy, reaching only 15 degrees. Perth showers at a max of 21. Adelaide has a shower or two and a max of 17. Hobart partly cloudy with a top of 16. Melbourne for the next week is as cold and wet as ever, with only a little break to welcome the weekend. Tomorrow we have possible showers and a max of 16. Friday is mostly sunny and has a top of 17. Saturday is partly cloudy with a max of 17, and Sunday has showers easing with a top of 15 before a cold start to next week, with Monday having a top of 13 and showers. Strong wind warning for the Victorian West Coast. UV levels for the rest of the week are set to stay low, so rug up, turn the heater on, and stay safe at home. That's your Newsline weather to the minute. I'm Isabel Harris. Back to you, Layla and Josh.
That Isabel. Well, that brings us to the end of the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Layla Arakova.
And I'm Josh Martin. Newsline will return tomorrow afternoon. But for now, goodbye.